Okay, we are back from break and our next item on the budget presentations. Oh, it is 3:32 p.m. It's the Thurston County Court Alternative Program. However, we are having some technical issues with the live stream, so if it goes offline, we are still recording this meeting, and if we do go offline, it will be posted later on. Okay, so as a guest here, we have Matt, who's joined us from sunny San Diego. He is the advisor to the American Bar Association Commission to Homelessness and Poverty, but he's also a public defender and director of the Homeless Court for San Diego. So thank you so much for coming today, Matt. I'll let you do a little small introduction of yourself.
Sure. Well, I appreciate you allowing me to be here. And by the way, it is very sunny here, so saying it's very lovely. So my name is Matt Wechter. I've been a public defender for about 13 years now. I've been working, we've had homeless court in San Diego since 1989 was when the first homeless court started, and it started monthly in 2001. The American Bar Association took it on as one of their initiatives. That same commission took it on in 2003, and we've been running ever since then. So we've been doing it a long time. And I think the video that we'll see hopefully in a moment kind of shows how San Diego welcomes those from other jurisdictions to come in and see how we do it. And the American Bar Association has me go out and provide technical assistance to other jurisdictions that are looking to start a similar program in their own community. And so, again, I run the homeless court program. I also run all of our pretrial work in San Diego. So obviously there's a lot of connection between what we do in that program as well as the community connection portion of homeless court.
Awesome. And so I think we have the video ready to go.
I believe so. 1 second.
And as he's queuing this up, I'll let everyone know this particular video you're going to see was produced by the San Diego DA's office. They have their whole own media department. And we had an entire delegation from the Portland area. So we had the district attorney, the public defender, the court administrator, I believe, criminal supervising judge, as well as 3 community-based organizations that came down to observe. And this was also the first session where we had 60 participants since COVID. So we had our maximum.
Yes, Your Honor, to dismiss the balance of the cases.
This is not your typical court hearing. You may think it's a celebration of some sort, and that is correct, in a way. It is a homeless court program graduation where dozens of previously unhoused individuals are being cleared of non-violent misdemeanor offenses and fines against them after successfully completing a treatment program.
It's identified as homeless court, so people who want to get involved know where to go, but at the same time, nobody in homeless court is homeless anymore. When somebody comes to one of our court sessions, you're going to see a room full of successful, sober individuals. They all have jobs, they're in school, they're reunited with their families, and they've left their old addictions and criminal behavior at home.
During the September homeless court graduation, there were over 50 participants, more than 200 cases, and about $140,000 in fines and fees dismissed. Individuals often have multiple cases, such as one person who had over 50 cases of mostly trolley tickets.
This is money that the court was never going to see, right? But this is money, and these are cases that we're providing barriers to folks. And the idea here is that if we can get rid of these fines and fees and get rid of these outstanding cases and warrants and holds on their licenses out of the DMV, then they can get back to work.
The homeless court program started in San Diego in 1988, and it's a collaboration between the DA's office, the public defender, city attorney, the Superior Court, and local service providers like the Center for Employment Opportunities.
And we're doing a lot of job coaching, job development. They are on a path towards self-sufficiency, and I want to advocate on their behalf, explaining all that great work that they've been doing, so I can write a letter to the judge and show all their accomplishments, and then through homeless court program, their cases can be dismissed.
Well, my goal is to get my license, to keep a clean driving record, to be able to travel and get a full time, and also be able to help provide for my siblings, my mom, and my nieces and nephews.
San Diego's homeless court program is a model for the nation, and almost every month there are officials from other counties visiting to observe.
We, like many cities across the country, are struggling with homelessness. And we understand that a lot of the things that keep people out of housing are the barriers that the criminal justice system erects. So when we heard about San Diego and their homeless court, we really wanted to check it out to see if something like this could work in Portland.
Today was all positivity. It was about lifting people up. It was about celebrating their accomplishments. And you could see the pride that brought out in those individuals, and that's really what's going to actually make change in their lives. So that was very impressive, and something that I'm hoping that we can do in Portland.
Thank you.
So, that kind of gives you an idea of what a typical session looks like. I know there's a proposal that you've all been looking at, and I've been able to look at a little bit of it. But I'm happy to answer questions about how San Diego does their homeless court, and how we can potentially be of assistance, to your community from a technical assistance ABA point of view. I can tell you I do this kind of work. We have Savannah, Georgia is coming in December. We're going to do, I believe in Louisville, we're going to be doing an event in February. So this is kind of one of the things that we try to help communities do to get it moving. And it's one of the things that I was able to meet with the prosecuting attorney this afternoon, and kind of go over some clarifications to make sure that he got a clearer picture of what the program is, at least in terms of design from our end. Again, every community does things a little bit differently, and from anywhere from the name to how it processes. But to the extent that I can provide additional clarification, because I believe I was able to hopefully provide some clarification for him, that I can provide for you all as well.
Thank you. Questions?
What fund do you guys work out of down there to make this happen?
So I will say that we actually don't use a fund to make it work. The great thing about this particular model is that it does not technically require outside funding to happen. The only additional funding I would say that comes through is the court has one or two positions to assist with the research and the inputting of the results afterwards, but we don't have a government-funded position that is doing, I believe what you have is the navigator portion. The person that you saw in the video, Cambria, she's actually an employee of Center for Employment Opportunity, and they actually applied for a grant for her position, right? So if there is a position and funding that is close to a navigator that I saw in your proposal, that would be it, and that actually came from the San Diego Bar Foundation. When we look at what all the different partners do, whether it be the public defender, the prosecuting attorney, the court, and all the providers, this is all work that they are doing anyways, right? So in terms of the work requirement from a judge, a bailiff, if a bailiff is required under Washington law for any court sessions in the community, public defender and district attorney, it is a couple of hours once a month to show up at that session that you just saw. The other work is the providers that are already doing that kind of case management in the community. And so really it's just, I always say that this court is a recognition court instead of a treatment court or a collaborative court. Because by the time the court is doing any work on this, someone has already done the work themselves to lift themselves up. So you want them to do those things. So the court isn't doing anything that they don't have to do to recognize someone's good work. Does that make sense?
So how is the treatment paid for?
So the programs have their funding from other sources, right? So whatever funding sources they're already, whether it be county, whether it be state, and like I said, California might fund things differently than Washington, so every state does things differently. So there might be funding streams that your group can provide to the providers, right, for additional spots, additional staff to be able to do that. But it is not something that is driven by homeless court, right? It is not something that is a line item that is in the county budget for homeless court. It is something that the provider is saying, we're doing these things. And the one thing I'll add on that is that a lot of our providers, similar to the position that they got for Cambria, because they are doing this work, because they are interacting with their other providers, because they are connecting in that way and providing these additional services, they're able to go for grants, not just from the county. They're able to go for national grants. They're able to go for funding sources from other ways to fund all their other programs. So it's really, the way I describe it, and one of my many analogies you might hear today is, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 type of situation for the work put in versus the output.
How about past criminal activity or records that the participant might have? Is there a threshold here that once you've done X, you're not gonna be in this, you're gonna go to jail? Or
The criminal history itself is not a barrier, right? And I think that's a recognition that we want to make it so that their criminal history isn't acting as a barrier for the things that this can clear up, right? One of the examples that I was discussing with the prosecuting attorney is someone that may have, let's say they have an active petty theft case that's a misdemeanor, right? And a bunch of other minor traffic related or other, non-serious situations. But they had a robbery 6 months ago or 8 months ago, right? Which would be a serious or violent felony, right? That might be a situation where the prosecutor goes, you know what? This is the same line of conduct, so I don't know that this person is appropriate, right? That may happen. But here's what I will tell you is that more often than not, in that situation, I use the phrase desistance. If you haven't heard that before, instead of it being complete abstinence of criminal.
say it again.
Desistance, right? So instead of picking up another robbery, now it's merely a petty theft, right? They're on their way down in terms of the seriousness of their criminal activity, and you want to actually reward that. I always talk about, it's kind of like when you have a kid that may have done something wrong and then they do another thing wrong, but it's not quite as bad, but you want to reward the fact that they're heading in a positive direction, right? It's kind of counterintuitive, but you want to show in that particular situation, look, there's still some activity that we're not proud of, but you know what? You've been working with whatever that program may be. Maybe it's a substance abuse, maybe it's mental health, whatever it is. You're working towards it. And I want to show from the district attorney's point of view that I'm willing to, give you a pass on this one because you're headed in a positive direction.
Would that be something kind of like first look, where the prosecutor gets to take a look at it and make a charging decision? Is that kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with first look.
So we have similar type of diversion type programs. One of the things that I was talking with the prosecuting attorney today is that, he was concerned from what appeared to me is, from a resource point of view, that he was going to have his deputy prosecuting attorneys having to look and making these offers and decisions on the front end. The beauty of the way that this model is, or the way that we at least have it, is that there's no agreement signed on the front end. There's no contract. It's where we continue the case out at arraignment, whether they say it's for homeless court or not. You continue it out for 3-4 months, whatever it may be, depending on what your average program length is. And then the prosecutor then only sees it again when it's back in for status because they didn't do the program, they didn't pick a program and work with them, or they've completed the requirements of that homeless court program. They've made providers made the referral, and it's been yanked into here, and they're making an offer based on the good work they've done. So it's actually less work from the prosecutor's end because they don't have to do that initial review on the front end. If that's similar to what first look is. If it's different, then I can address that.
How about sex offenders? We have quite a few sex offenders that are required to register in Washington, and they'll register to a geographic area. Do you have that same type of activity down there? And does that restrict them from participating and I don't know, the fact that they're not registering to an address is some bit of a problem to the community.
So the way that, different states have different laws on registration, ours is if they're unhoused, they have to register every 30 days as to at least someone where they're at in that city. We do not handle sex cases, and that's one of our restrictions. So sex, failure to register, things like that, but their status as a sex offender is not something that we take into account. Because they might have a sex offense from 15 years ago that has nothing to do with what they have right now, and even in that case, we wanna make sure that if someone is having to register and all those types of things, we wanna make it so that they don't have barriers to housing, so they can actually have some place to register physically, which is better for the purpose of public safety.
And how TCAP is kind of structured right now, yeah, those would not fall into kind of the program either. It would just be nonviolent misdemeanor offenses.
How about like shoplifting and those type of things seem to be on the rise, I guess. Are they same way down in your neck of the woods?
I mean, shoplifting and theft is on the rise everywhere, right?
Okay.
So yes, we have plenty of those. And I always say that there's differences between what a felony is and what a misdemeanor is in different states, right? So sometimes there are things that are misdemeanors in California that are felonies other places and vice versa, right? So I often say, use the felony misdemeanor as a broad designation, but there are some low-level felonies that may fit into this and some misdemeanors like domestic violence that may not fit into it.
How about recidivism with your graduates? Is it pretty good?
So they did a study early on, and I'm trying to work on getting a new study done on recidivism. But what I would point back to is the desistance. So to directly answer your question, I don't have an actual number because we were gonna actually do one of those studies right before COVID and then COVID happened. So I'm working with the Judicial Council and the ABA to possibly fund one of those.
Do you have quite an influx of folks coming from elsewhere to your jurisdiction, mainly because, the weather's a lot better and maybe services are better? Do you find those folks less likely to succeed than your local homegrown people that have fallen into problems or?
No, I would say we see
difference?
both. We see both that come through. It really, whether they came here a month ago or whether they came here 10 years ago, it really is the same. We treat it the same. I don't see any difference in their participation. But one of the things to remind you, and I know I just want one more part of this question is that one of the questions I get is, how many people start the program and don't finish, right? Because we don't do this contract method where somebody has to sign up and do it particular ways, we don't see them.
You only got a graduation.
We only got a graduation, right? And so it's a double-edged sword, right? It makes it so that it's not as resource intensive. And it makes it so that we only see the people that are doing the good work. And we spend our resources on the people that have spent their time to do the good work.
What do you think this has affected with your jail population? I mean, it's gotta have reduced your jail population. Do you have any idea? It's hard to quantify the positive, but.
It is hard to quantify the positive. What I will tell you is that part of what we do is that when someone has an active warrant and they start working with one of the programs, we do a stipulation to get that warrant recalled immediately. So I imagine, in an anecdotal sense, that by reducing the number of outstanding warrants that people have, that's reducing the number of jail days that are used by the sheriff on arresting people on these low-level warrants.
Let me get Commissioner Answer questions, sir.
Well, I asked these questions of Leah, but since you're kind of closer to what you guys are doing, I want to ask the same thing. I was a defense attorney, and one of the things I didn't totally understand was, so there's a navigator, and you said you don't have that navigator. What I was worried about, and I'll go backwards. What I was worried about is person A has an alcohol problem. Person B has a mental health issue, a fentanyl problem, person C has got all those things and like 5 other things, health issue, and so person A, shows up to their alcohol class and they're good to go and they're criminal case, maybe it's a felony, maybe it's a low-level felony that you guys include, is gone. Person B does A, B, C, and D, but he's also got E, F, G, H to do, and he doesn't do those, so he's back in court. So having a consistent approach, like who is vetting the plan, the treatment plan, so that everyone gets kind of treated fairly and one guy doesn't get piled on with requirements just because he's got more problems, or because the person laying out his plan is more aggressive about wanting to thing, and that somebody else goes, oh, you just go do this and you're good to go. And then you get these wildly, unfair treatment from defendant to defendant to defendant.
So I'll answer that in a couple of ways. So because we don't have a specific assessment and navigator where someone is saying you have to do X, Y, and Z and it's one thing, right? The participant in our model chooses their provider, right? So we have our list of providers. We have many, many providers. We've been doing this for a long time, right? Every community has a different number. But those providers work together. So if someone says, you know what, I really need to address my substance abuse issue, and so they'll start working with Salvation Army. But as they're working with Salvation Army, all these programs, they already have their own assessments, right? Why are we duplicating that, right? And so they're gonna go in, they're gonna do the assessment with Salvation Army. And Salvation Army is probably gonna identify that they might have a mental health component. The beauty of the network that's been created is that Salvation Army then knows, you know what? John over at Mental Health Systems can actually help me with the mental health portion of this client. And so I'm gonna work in that. So, what we'll see a lot of times when people stand up is that they're graduating specifically from Center for Employment Opportunity, but they've also worked with Urban Street Angels on a substance abuse issue, right? Or something else on a mental health issue, right? It actually does address all those different issues. In terms of it being fair, we're addressing the root cause, right? So Salvation Army has a different requirement for referral than Think Dignity, which is another one of our kind of like lower barrier, low level programs. The goal here is to address the root cause. Substance abuse takes longer, right? So that's gonna be a longer requirement than, someone that has a particular, it's really housing, so they're gonna work with PATH, people assisting the homeless, right? So whether it's 180 days or whether it's 60 days, right? Sometimes it's different for each participant. And the only time the court is going to see those people is once the service provider has said, this person has addressed their root issue. And that's where those requirements come from. The steering committee, which is kind of the provider board of directors is what I call it, right? We have 8 people on this provider steering committee. It doesn't have a prosecutor, it doesn't have a judge, it doesn't have anybody else, the justice partners, other than myself as the liaison, right? I'm not a voting member, right? That board of directors, that steering committee, vets the other providers to make sure that their interventions are appropriate, right? So that the Salvation Army, because it's substance abuse, might have to be 120 days or whatever, I forget their particular number at this point, I think it's 120 days, right? Versus housing is, they have to be consistent for 45 days and work with a case manager and et cetera, et cetera. That steering committee, their reputation is on the line with the court, and it's developed that trust over time.
So if Salvation Army does substance abuse, but says, I want you to go see this mental health counselor, and your client, stellar in substance abuse, completes everything, but never goes over, because maybe he's afraid of medication, he was medicated in the past or something. Then what happens? Like Salvation Army says, he's complete, but does Salvation Army say, not gonna refer him for graduation because he didn't follow through on my referral to the mental health guy, or?
The trust is with the providers, right? So if that provider says, you know what, this person has not addressed their root issue, then they're not going to refer them. Okay. If they believe, yes, they could benefit from mental health, but that's not really the main thing that's driving, and I'm gonna recommend that they do that, but it's not gonna be something that's gonna hold them back, then they'll still refer them. That trust has been grown over time.
Okay, that makes sense. My other question was kind of, Robin already asked it, but the funding for the treatment, I know there's providers who have grants and funding where they can provide to people with no money, but other ones don't have that. And I would think every community has a different suite of that. Yep. We may not have what you have in San Diego, I don't know. We have some folks.
I think we get better, maybe.
Maybe we have better, but I don't know. I feel like
it's possible.
We have a range of folks that, it's not, sometimes it's, do you meet these criteria? Sometimes it's, do you how, you know, do you qualify for Medicaid, then that one's funded through there and this, but, you know, are there people, I guess I'm just wondering, like, I mean, this isn't a question for you, unless you can shed light on it, but I'm wondering for us, are we gonna have people falling through the cracks where they can't get that assessment? I guess we'd have to backfill that maybe with TST funding or something to make sure, because I would never want a situation where, you know, some people don't have the ability to follow through and this program is only available for certain privileged few. Privileged because they're so poor they qualify for a program, or privileged because they have money or whatever.
Well, I would say that the majority of the people that come through, and that's where the homeless or at risk of homelessness, right? We don't require them to prove indigency, because if you're gonna go start working with Think Dignity or Urban Street Angels, you're not at a point where, you know, you're gonna be funding a lot of things, right? Like, you're gonna be homeless or at risk of homelessness. What I will say in terms of, you know, whether the county wants to, you know, put the funding into making sure that there are, I'm not gonna say beds, because it's just spots in the programs, right? That's something that I think would be a discussion that would probably be outside of the homeless court discussion, right? That's something that if your community needs it, your community needs it. Homeless court is a way that it can actually see some results from that by using the money you're sending to those programs to actually remove barriers. Because here's the idea, I talk about this. Let's say someone picks up an active case and they go through and they're, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, they're on probation, they do everything that they're told to do, and then they finish successfully. Let's say they even get it expunged, and they're ready to step up and go out into the community and get a job, and they can't get a job because they have all these other debts from old cases, or they have other cases that are holding up as barriers to them, right? That they end up, because they can't get a job, because they can't get their license, because they can't get housing, because their credit report is bad because of all these collection reports that have gone out, they end up falling back into that cycle where they're using, or they're committing theft, or whatever it may be, because they can't get out of that rut, right? So this is a way that if you decide to use that funding as a part of this discussion or separately to bolster your resources currently, I think you'll see better results by having a program like this to remove those barriers.
I want to add, I asked that specific question on funding from the service providers that we met down there. And I asked specifically about, well, how does the county, right? Like, does the county provide resources? Because for us, a lot of those grants that are going out, right, they're provided through the Regional Housing Council, and they're, and so what they said, it works similar in San Diego, but it's written into the contracts as that funding is going out. So those service providers that are kind of chosen into this group, right, as they're applying for these different grants as well, it's kind of rolled into those contracts as well. So it's the same source of funding.
They're taking on that commitment to serve those folks, and they're not gonna sign up that they don't think that they can fund that.
So I thought that was a very interesting piece, because I pushed really hard on that. I was like, we have very limited resources. We hear it all the time. How will they be able to pay for these additionally if we're asking them to pay? But it's, as they said, well, these are clients that we're already serving. And, you know, it's already written into the contract as we're, you know, signing these contracts for these grants that we're applying for on a yearly basis. So it would just be kind of rolled into that.
I'm trying to think, we've got our LEAD program that works well with law enforcement. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Then we've got a peer counseling process that goes through the BHO.
Oh.
You know, with kind of with the LEAD, and it's peer counseling. I'm trying to think about getting that person started in the right direction, you know, and sometimes they need some guidance.
The resource hub is.
And we've got the resource hub.
Something that really is it's kind of it's a embryonic, you know, beginning of that provider network.
Right.
That would, I think, would morph into what would be supporting this court.
Exactly, and just to say, I was able to visit the resource hub immediately before I got here, and as someone that in my day job doing all the pretrial work and we actually took a tour of all these resource hubs in Northern California because we're trying to build one. And I will tell you, what you have going on there is best practice. It is absolutely what it should be. It's, you know, a small, what I call retail space. It, you know, has a clothing rack. It offers a cup of coffee. It has what we call hotel space for other providers to come in. That's what my office, as part of the grant that we're doing for the pretrial space, is doing within Center for Employment Opportunity from 9 to 12 every morning, that we talk to folks that we got out the night before. So what that is doing could be an excellent growing spot for what this network would be.
When you have graduates from, they're homeless today, then tomorrow they're housed in, I don't know, low-income housing or what it might be. And maybe they're on Medicaid, or maybe they go out and get a job. And when I ask about the recidivism portion of that, is that kind of successful as far as some maybe actually go on to get a decent job and be productive members of the community, and others maybe stagnant and they're on Medicaid and they're not maybe really capable of working, but at least they're not a problem? Do you?
Absolutely. And in fact, a lot of the providers, we have the actual case manager or the representative case manager stand up there with them in front of the judge. A lot of those case managers are substance abuse counselors that graduated those programs.
Well, we'd call those peer counselors here, I think, so very
Yep.
similar.
So we see a lot of people that come through that way.
I just want to let you know that Leah has already touched base with the LEAD program and, you know, just trying to see like, can there be like a nexus in this? Can we partner with LEAD? And she's already gotten that confirmation. So she's already been doing that work.
Grease the skid, so to speak.
Yeah, so just to make sure that there is a connection of sort. I kind of want to, unless there's additional questions for Matt, kind of bring back the conversation to the TCAP, because the request is, you know, for a navigator person. So what the navigator or the, what did Leah call it? It is under commissioners. I'm not sure what the name of the position actually is.
You
Is
mean
that
in
it?
this
Oh, there she
budget
is.
cycle, you're thinking of an
It would be a
FTE?
program coordinator.
A program coordinator, thank you. I was like, I'm not sure what exactly. It would be a program coordinator that would be housed under pretrial services, and it would be in the resource hub, of course, because this is where this program would be at. And it would be to help, of course, with the implementation of this program. It would be to get the stakeholder group together that would include all of course, the law and justice partners together and kind of just start on this journey, as well as, you know, getting together the service providers, you know, and getting them as a steering committee together to kind of move on to that next step. How this would be funded is, you know, partly through general fund. We heard during that first commissioner session that you did not want general fund, but there are other sources for through treatment sales tax, home fund, and veterans fund. Because one of the main ideas through TCAP would be to have, and we've also been in touch with the Veterans Hub, is to work with them also as a resource and connection. We heard from Keith when he came and presented that there are several veterans that he works with that are not able to access resources because they still have old fines and old warrants that they're not able to that they're still kind of pending. And so in conversations with him and this program, he's very interested in being one of the service providers and one of the people who participate in this. So that's why we brought the Veterans Fund, maybe to kind of help and assist in funding this program or this navigator, as well as we start through this pilot.
I guess my initial blush on this whole thing is, why would we need any general fund at all? That comes back to Robin. When we've got, you know, the home fund and we've got TST and the vet fund. I mean, I would think that would certainly be available to solve this problem.
Is it just as a backstop to something that doesn't fit into the boxes?
If we were to choose someone to serve that didn't fit into one of these others, then that would be
Like you divvy up
something we
as
can
much
fall
time
back
as you
on,
can
but
between the three.
we could certainly not put the general fund money in for the pilot
Yeah,
and limit the people that we
and
would
let's see what we
serve.
end up with. I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we wanna do this, I guess, is.
Put
That's
the-
my
the
question.
Well, then you win already because it only takes 2 votes.
Just so you know, Matt, we've got quite a diverse board here, you know. I was a lawman for many, many years and.
I was a public
he
defender.
was a public
I say,
defender.
it's a perfect spectrum, I
And then
love it.
we've got a regular citizen between us, so it works
From the
out
court,
pretty
right?
good.
Yeah, I like it.
But what I also heard Matt say is that it doesn't necessarily have to be an impediment to serving. If the clients or folks are already being served by the service providers, and they don't fall into one of those particular categories, they could still benefit from the program.
They could, but also what we've heard from Leah is that our providers are pretty much at capacity. So
Pretty
what
much what?
she would, at capacity. So part of this proposal is to put in a little bit of money to give an incentive to our providers to take on additional clients.
Oh, okay, well, I don't know who drew that up, but I can't hardly argue with that. If
Right.
that's what you're thinking,
Yeah,
so
that's
I don't
the-
know who put that together.
That's Leah, and that's the.
And it's the home fund piece about the mental health, because the home fund permits up to 40% related to mental health. Is that why that's there? Is to meet
It could be
folks
that,
who have
or
mental health
there are
needs?
people who are going to need housing.
Yeah.
So there's the
But I'm just saying,
housing
don't forget
component
that
of
there's
it.
that extra,
Extra piece.
home fund can cover anything related to mental health, because that's part of the statute.
Right,
As someone that does a lot of these discussions, as well as, you know, new kind of programs in my own county, the word pilot is a very powerful word,
Yeah.
right? Because it not only makes it so that your numbers are smaller and more digestible, but it makes it so you can try new things, and it's, what I found is build it and they will come, right? So once you start that provider network, to your question, Commissioner, about lead, law enforcement actually, so we have the homeless court app that you've seen that has all of the providers, and I can show whoever would like to see it, but we have all the providers and the population they serve and you know, all that kind of stuff. When law enforcement's contacting folks that may have an encampment or they may have that first contact, they can use that list of providers, say, look, I'm not gonna write you that citation, or I'm gonna put you into a lead type of situation. And here's a list of all the providers that you could work with. So the network that gets created by a pilot like this, that's that 1 + 1 = 3. You can use that network of trusted providers for all sorts of other things later on.
So who paid to build your app?
The app is free. I could take, it's called Glide Apps is the tool,
Okay.
and it's free. And it's run off of Google Sheets. And so literally, if I wanted to add a provider, I would load up the Google Sheet, put in a new row, and it would be there in 5 minutes. And I could, as part of the ABA San Diego Toolkit and Technical Assistance, I can duplicate mine, add you as a user, and then take myself off, and then you can just put your programs in there and it's good to go tomorrow.
That's pretty exciting.
Glide, what did you call it?
Glide Apps.
Glide apps.
Well, I want to thank you, Matt, you know, just for all your help. I know that you'll be meeting with Pat and Carrie here shortly.
I got a full day.
Full day of meetings. But I know just from Leah's standpoint, from my standpoint, we've appreciated all of your help during this whole process. For you know, you welcoming us in San Diego and kind of giving us that experience to really experience homeless court graduation, what that's like, and that impact firsthand. So just thank you for coming up, for presenting here the San Diego model, and for, you know, talking with some of our own stakeholders and our board today. It is 4:11, and Nicole, anything else?
Say that we'd close our budget presentations for today, and we'll pick up tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Yes, we are with the auditor.
General government tomorrow. Thank you. We are
Thank you.
adjourned.